Well, hello. Good to see everybody, metaphorically speaking. What we're doing right now is a question and answer time. I thought this might be something good for us to do. We don't get together right now, but we can still interact in some different ways. So what I'm planning for the future, Lord willing, is that on Tuesdays around lunchtime, I will host a Q&A here on our Facebook and YouTube sites. So if you would like to submit a question, I'm trying to work out a way we can do this real time where you give me the question and I try to answer right away. But right now, our internet connection causes enough of a lag. What you're seeing or hearing is actually a few minutes or sometimes a minute, minute and a half behind me. Makes it a little awkward. So for now, if you have a question that you'd like to submit, you can simply email it to me for next week. I'll put the email up here so you can see it. Email it to stockdalechurch@gmail.com. You can also, if you want, leave it in the comments, either on the Facebook page or the YouTube page, and I will find those, hopefully, after everything's said and done. If you do email in your question, in the subject line, please try to put Q&A so I can more easily find it from all of the junk mail that I know we all get. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next however long. Tuesdays at lunch, we'll do some Q&A. Now, since this is the first one, let me lay out some ground rules. First, any question's okay. There's not really such a thing as a bad question. Now, there may be some inappropriate ones. We're going to try to keep this family friendly. So if I avoid your question for that reason, please understand that's the only reason I'm avoiding it, is to keep things family friendly. Hopefully that won't even come up. Also, anytime I do a Q&A, there is a certain answer that I always reserve the right to give, and with the understanding that it is a perfectly good answer. And that answer is, I don't know. I in no way claim to be omniscient. I in no way claim to be the smartest man alive. I'm not even as smart as I think I am. So take that however you want to. So sometimes you may ask a question and I may simply have to say, I don't know. Now, the other thing about Q&As that I want us to sort of be upfront on early on is I hope you're not coming here looking for your answer. That's really not what Q&As are about. A Q&A, when you're talking about your faith, is simply an opportunity to ask a question to get input. Now, I will give you my understanding for what it's worth. I will try to share some biblical insights on whatever questions are asked, but you have to make up your own answers. You can't simply turn around and say, well, my preacher said this, or Kenneth said this, or some other person or personality said this. You're responsible for yourself. But Q&As are great to ask the questions, to get different perspectives, to get different ideas for you to think about and work out as you come to your own conclusions. So anyway, that's what all this is about. It won't last too long on Tuesdays. We'll do however many questions we can in a given amount of time. For a lot of you, I know you're getting ready for lunch, so I thought this might be a good opportunity. Hopefully it won't give you indigestion as you do that. Now, for this first week, I'm going to go ahead and toss out a question that I'm sure would come up, and let's go ahead and get it out of the way. And that question is simply this: did God cause the coronavirus? I've seen this online, Facebook, I've heard it in the news. People saying this is God's way of punishing us for not being the people we're supposed to be. Here is my short answer to that. Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Here's the problem. When you try to attribute something to God, you better know what you're talking about. For one thing, this isn't an American problem. This isn't a Chinese problem. This isn't a European problem. The coronavirus is a worldwide problem. That's why they've labeled it a pandemic. It's spreading through all countries as we speak. And it is a problem, but it's not a new problem either. This happened 100 years ago. You've heard it in the news. It gets mentioned occasionally now. When the Spanish flu came in the earliest 20th century, it was actually far worse than this one. It's estimated 50 million people worldwide died from that flu. And it began, by the way, in the U.S., in an army camp in Kansas, they believe. So these things happen. So to attribute something to God, well, most of us aren't qualified. Actually, I would argue all of us aren't qualified unless God has given us some kind of special insight. A great book of the Bible to consider when you're thinking about something like this is the book of Job. In the book of Job, sorry, just clearing this out for us. In the book of Job, there are two main themes that occur, and we catch one, we often miss the other. The first theme that we often get is, can a person be faithful even when they lose everything? And that's really the main purpose of the book of Job. There is actually a bet going on between God and Satan. Satan saying, Job only loves you and worships you and trusts you because you take care of him. If he loses his wealth or his health or his family, he'll curse you to your face and his faith will evaporate. But the book of Job is about God trusting Job. So he allows Satan to do these different things to Job, always setting limits, by the way. He never just gives Satan a free hand. He always sets limits, and Job stays true to the end. Now, the other part has to do with Job's friends. Now, Job's friends show up, and it's a little strange because the majority of the book of Job, as far as just the bulk of the words in the book, you can't actually trust in that they record bad advice. It's Job's friends basically telling Job, hey, Job, this wouldn't happen to you if God wasn't angry with you. And that's, well, let's be fair, that's the attitude a lot of people are taking with events such as this, whether it's the coronavirus or 9/11 or any natural catastrophe, a hurricane, tornadoes, whatever. People want to turn around and say, well, God's doing this to you because he's mad at you. Yes, no, maybe, we don't know. In Job's case, we actually know that was dead wrong. God was happy with Job. God was proud of Job. In fact, this only happens to Job because God's bragging about him. And God trusts that, no, Job is my faithful servant regardless of what happens. All right, so, and then you get to the end of it. Let me not forget to make my point here, since this is live. You get to the end of the book of Job, and God goes in and tells Job's friends who were so sure that they were telling Job what God wanted them to hear. He said, you lied about me, and I am going to strike you dead for lying about me unless my servant Job prays for you, which of course Job did. But it was God making the point, hey, you chose to tell people I did something and you were dead wrong. And God took that very seriously. So anytime you hear somebody saying that some natural catastrophe, and let's be honest, the coronavirus basically is a natural catastrophe. When that happens, you can't necessarily attribute that to God doing something on purpose. We live in a world that's dying. It has been since Adam and Eve rebelled in the garden. Death entered into creation at that point. Corruption entered creation at that point. Now, if we back up before that point, excuse me, God had created a world with no sickness, no disease, no dying, no corruption. Everything was perfect. That was the kind of life God wanted to give us. But we as a species, as humanity, made the choice to rebel against God. We decided to be gods to ourselves. And it wasn't just Adam and Eve. Every human who has lived since then has made that same choice. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. We've all done that. Because of that, this whole universe is dying. So things like viruses run rampant. Hurricanes spin up in the oceans. Things crumble and decay and die and fail. All right, that's just the world. Now, is God causing this? Is he not? There's no way to know. Now, this is not a new question. I want to look at a couple of New Testament passages here. I'll put them up so you can follow along or at least put up the reference. The first one I want us to look at is in John chapter 9. In John chapter 9, and we're going to look in verses 1 to 3. This is a conversation that took place between Jesus and his apostles. And there was a very common belief in Jesus' day that everything that happened to you was because God wanted it to. Specifically, if things were going good for you, if you were making money, if you were healthy, if your life was great, well, then God is definitely blessing you. And on the flip side, if you were sick, if you were hurting, if you were struggling, well, it's because you sinned and God's punishing you. And they saw the world through this very strict black and white lens. And so the apostles come to Jesus with a question regarding that. So look down to John chapter 9, and I'm going to start in verse 1, read down through verse 3. As he went along, because of the situation, because something bad was happening, that somebody had to have sinned. That was just the assumption, all right? So if something's bad, somebody sinned, God's angry, he's punishing somebody. But look at Jesus' answer. Look at verse 3. He said, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Everything bad that happens is not punishment from God. It's just not. Sometimes it's just the way the world works. Let's look at another passage here real quick. Over in Luke chapter 13. Luke chapter 13. I'll hopefully put this one up here too. Luke chapter 13, and we're going to go verses 1 through 8 on this one. Again, same question comes up. Who's evil? Who sinned that caused something else to happen? And I want you to look at Jesus' response, because this really should help us as we deal with things like the coronavirus or hurricanes or tornadoes or forest fires or whatever it is we have to deal with. All right? So Luke chapter 13. Now there were some present at that time who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Jesus answered, do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered this way? I tell you no. But unless you repent, you too will perish. Or those 18 who died when the Tower of Siloam fell on them. Do you think Do you think that they were more guilty than all the others living in Jerusalem? I tell you no. But unless you repent, you too will perish. A man had a fig tree growing in his vineyard, and he went and to look for fruit on it, but did not find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, for 3 years now I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree, and haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it use up the soil? Sir, the man replied, leave it alone for 1 more year, and I will dig around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then I will cut it down. All right, it starts out people talking about this terrible thing that's happened to this particular group. And Jesus knows what they're thinking. He knows they're thinking, hey, God must be punishing them, right? And he says, do you really think they were worse sinners than all the rest of the Galileans? Absolutely not. And then he mentions some tower that apparently fell in Jerusalem and killed a number of people. He goes, you think the people that the tower fell on were worse than everybody else in Jerusalem? No. Why is he saying that? Because we cannot put what happens to people, especially random events out of somebody's control, as proof of God's anger against them. That's just not the way it works. Now, granted, if I go out and I commit crimes and I sin and I do terrible things and the repercussions of that come back on me, yeah, I can look at the repercussions for my actions as God warning me. Now, again, he may not specifically be doing them to me, but he's designed the world in such a way that there are repercussions for our actions. But this world is also, like we said a while ago, dying. That means that some things that happen, well, they just happen. And they weren't for a purpose necessarily. Now, here's the cool thing. We have a God who, even though he may not cause all these things specifically to happen, they may just be random natural occurrences. I believe in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's the passage, time and chance overtake us all. Even in a world of time and chance, even in a world where bad things happen to good people, God can still take these events and he can use them. Now, you notice he immediately follows up this conversation about the people the tower fell on, or the Galileans that were killed by their political leaders, with this parable about a fig tree. What's the point of the fig tree? Actually, the point of the fig tree is God isn't working out of wrath. He's working out of grace and mercy. He tells the story of this man who comes and he's planted this tree, but for 3 years he's looked for fruit. He hasn't found fruit, and he's about ready to cut it down. That's what should happen, right? It's an unfruitful tree. What's its point at that point? The point of the parable, however, is what the groundskeeper says. Give it one more year. I would argue that the groundskeeper is Jesus. He himself said he did not come to judge, but to save. When things like this happen, whether they're global in scale or personal in scale, don't always jump to the conclusion that God's doing something to you, but always know he could be doing something for you. He can use any situation to help you. So that raises the question, is God trying to tell us something with this pandemic or anything else that's going on in the world? Now, the answer to that is unequivocally yes. He's always speaking to us. He's always trying to get our attention. He's always trying to help us find him and find the life that he's calling us to live. Now, you may be living through this situation right now, and God may be speaking a lot of different things to you. Hey, you need to slow down. You need to quit putting worldly things first all the time. Remember to put spiritual things first in your life. Remember to put your family first or early on in your life. Don't think your life is made up of things or opportunities or career. None of that makes up your life. Your life is spiritual. Look for the spiritual. Look for God. Maybe he's trying to speak to you right now and saying, hey, here's an opportunity to take care of your neighbors, to help those who are scared or suffering or whatever their situation may be. And you may have to get creative in how you do it. You know, with the social distancing aspects of this situation, no, you can't always go over and knock on your neighbor's door. That may not be the best thing to do, especially if they're elderly or sick. You sure don't want to be the one that brings this bug into their house and causes worse things to happen. But you can call. You can email if they email. You can send a note. You can go mow the yard, make them stay in the house, wave at them through the window. But you can still reach out to your neighbors. What's God trying to tell you right now? Maybe he's trying to tell you, hey, quit trusting in all this other stuff. Remember, I'm the one who has you. I've got you covered. You're going to be okay. Yes, you may run low on toilet paper, but the world will not end. All right, so as you think of all of this, never accuse God of doing something that you don't know for sure he did, but give him credit that he can and will work through it. Now, can God punish his people? Can God punish his creation? Oh yeah, God's sovereign. He can do whatever he wants. This is his. But the God we know in Scripture, he loves us more than anything else. He wants to save all of us more than anything else. He's the one arguing to be patient, to give us a chance, to help us come out in a better place. So take those thoughts. Remember, if you have more questions or any questions, I can't say more, you haven't given me any yet. If you have some questions, email them to me, stockdalechurch@gmail.com. Put them in the conversation in the comments, either on Facebook or on our YouTube page. And next Tuesday, Lord willing, we'll do this again. I hope this has been a blessing for you. I hope you have a great lunch and have a good rest of your day. So until next time, God bless.